Good afternoon. I appreciate this is the very last session of the conference and you may or will be a bit presented out, so a special thank you for attending. I'm here today to talk to you about application support with Apex applications, looking after the users when development has finished. My name is Paul Jones and I'm a development consultant at Explorer. Who are Explorer? Our heritage in the Oracle Partner Network is strong, stable and growing. We're an Oracle Platinum Partner with multiple specializations to our name, including managed services, engineered systems, Oracle Cloud implementations and software asset management. We're the #1 Apex development consultancy in the UK, with a particular focus currently on Forms to Apex projects and developing cloud-native applications. We're the current Oracle Systems Partner of the Year, and we've been lucky enough to win the UK OUG Database Partner of the Year for 3 years running, as voted for by our customers. So, who am I? As mentioned, I'm Paul Jones. I'm a Apex development consultant at Explorer with many years' experience with Oracle database technologies. At Explorer, I'm a trainer on Apex. I do various speaking events like these. We maintain a blog with useful ideas and subjects. Please check out the link at the end. But most importantly, most of the time, I am a consultant and developer. I really try to promote Apex where possible, which is partly the reason for this presentation. Since I started working with Apex a few years ago, some of my ex-colleagues have asked me what supporting an Apex application is like and what are the challenges that are involved when supporting an Apex application. Almost like they're set out with some sort of mindset that it will be more difficult or different than any other technology. So, my support history. Before becoming an Apex development consultant, my previous roles had mainly centered around IT support, with a bit of DevOps mixed in. My support life started in university when I worked on an IT help desk application with no database at all. But since then, I've supported a PHP application which had a MySQL database, a Visual Basic desktop installed application which had a Microsoft SQL database, J2EE applications which made use of Oracle databases, Oracle e-Business Suite, which obviously Oracle database there, and then more recently Oracle Apex applications. All of these applications have varied from small number of users, 10 to 15, to very large enterprise level applications with 1,000+ users. Which leads me on to the reason for this presentation really. What I've come to realise is that no matter the technology, when it comes to support, the same challenges come up time and time again. Every support role which I've worked, it's the same list of things which apply. So today is really about how those common challenges in support are met when supporting an Apex application in particular, and also what can Apex developers do to make support easier in the future when they've moved on to something else or a different application. The people supporting the application are quite likely to not be the people who originally wrote it. So this is my summary list of some of the most common challenges that you see when working in application support, which really forms our agenda for this presentation. Environments. So we're going to be talking about multi-tenancy, why we might need multiple environments, how we control them, how we access them, how we replicate the environments. Logging issues. How easy is it for different users to report problems and issues when using the application? Is it harder than, say, on any other website or in any other different technologies? Investigating issues. If there is a problem in the application, and you are investigating that issue, how hard is it to debug in an Apex application in order to work out what went wrong and what we need to do in order to fix it? Releases. How do we manage releases or upgrades whilst also keeping all the current users of the application informed about upcoming releases and happy with the speed in which the application is unavailable? Monitoring and reporting. Is there anything built into Apex that aids with monitoring and reporting? How hard is it to view that information? If there is some standard logging built in, how can we lift that out into the front end in order to report on it for more administrative users? Performance. How can we monitor the performance of our Apex applications as a whole? And also a final topic on Miscellaneous, which predominantly is a few hints and tips for you that centered around largely what you can do during development that don't fit into any of these specific categories. Each one of these categories could very easily be a presentation on its own, so I won't be getting very detailed about any individual topic, and today is really meant to show you how these most common issues to application support can be handled when you are supporting an Apex application. But keep an eye on our blog, which I'll link to at the end, as I will be covering some or all of these in more detail over the next few months. So, environments. Let's define what we mean by an environment. Well, it's the collection of things that is hosting our application. Everything that is needed to have a fully functioning, usable system which runs our software. In my experience, the architecture often differs across different organisations and dependent upon the technology in which the software has been written. It can really vary hugely in both complexity. Does it run on a single piece of hardware, in a huge server farm, a combination of both? The number of tiers that are involved in the entire application. You may have database tiers, application tiers, web tiers, presentation tiers, portal tiers, etc. What technology does it use, and is it accessed in a browser? Is it a local installation? What language is it written in? Does it have a database? Is it stored in flat files? Is there caching involved? And also the size. We could be talking there about the database size or the installation size of the application. So what challenges does the environment place on application support? Well, you often need multiple environments. You need your development environment for fixing issues, your SIT and UAT testing environments for testing fixes, your pre-production environment, which is normally a replication of production so that you can look at fairly close time data of production, and then of course you need production itself, which is where the application is running, where all your users are logging into. Replication can be a real issue with the environment in application support. Sometimes it can be quite complicated to create another instance in order to have a place where to fix and investigate issues. There are often multiple teams involved with large-scale enterprise applications. You may have DBAs, server admins, development team themselves, a deployment team, a test team. I work somewhere, no names, where to have an environment cloned took 5 days, involved 3 teams, and involved rebuilding the entire application and database from scratch. And that made it a huge challenge when investigating different issues. So, what architecture are we dealing with when supporting an Apex application? Well, if you've been to a What is Apex presentation before, then you've likely already seen this picture, and it's actually pretty simple. but as we all know, it's very powerful and effective. We have our database tier here on the right, the Oracle database, which actually does all of the heavy lifting for us. It hosts our data, our code, and the application runtime itself, the Apex engine. Then we have a middle tier, which is predominantly responsible for tunneling our requests. Sometimes we may have ORDs included in the middle tier for web services, and also sometimes Apache for hosting static content. But largely speaking, the middle tier is just a tunnel. And then we have our browser, any supported browser where the application is used and even developed and supported from. So now we know what architecture Apex consists of. How does Apex's relatively simple architecture and the Oracle database help us for meeting some of these challenges on the environment in application support? Well, firstly, Oracle Apex supports multi-tenancy within the same database. Well, what does that mean? Well, in our Oracle database, we can have multiple data schemas and workspaces. So then we can define different workspaces for Apex and run our application or applications, or even the same one, in different workspaces for different users, looking at different schemas depending upon the requirements. And what does that mean? Well, it's entirely possible to have all of your necessary environments, dev, test, production, sitting on the same actual single database. Then all you have to do is set up replication scripts to clone the schema, i.e. from schema 1 to schema 4, when you want an environment refresh. And there really are, that I'm aware of, not many technologies that support that kind of thing. But although Apex and Oracle supports multi-tenancy, this generally isn't the preferred approach. What we do at Explorer is we actually clone the whole environment, the whole database, and it's really quite simple with some tools already out there, which I'll talk about shortly. The model we use is from our production environment. We clone this to other environments. We create a pre-production / test daily clone environment, which includes a daily replication of all our schemas, and then also a development environment, and this has ad hoc replication, so whenever a refresh is required, we just have to run a script to update our support environment with the latest information, data. And you can set this model up for as many different environments as you want. So if you need all the full stack of environments such as SIT and UAT, you can also introduce that replication into there as well. Finally, my last thought on cloning and setting up support environments. Everywhere that I've worked in support, one of the most useful things as someone supporting the application has been the ability to set up an environment locally, just on your own desktop or on your own laptop, just for tinkering, testing, but also useful when environments are down for refresh or not available, that type of thing. Well, with Apex, it's really simple to set up a local instance on a single PC. On the screen there are a couple of solutions for achieving this, which is Oracle Express Edition or Docker. There was a presentation on doing this at this event, I think. But there's plenty of information out there on the internet for setting up both a Oracle Express Edition database and running Apex, and also Docker containers for running Apex. And then once you have your container set up, you can install the applications into there, and also some of the database objects that you're quite likely to need, your packages, your functions, and your database tables as well. So, in summary on environments, what advantages have I got because my application is in the database with multi-tenancy and or instance cloning? Well, With multi-tenancy, you have the advantage of your data and application never actually leaving the same database. But even with instance cloning, if you're using the correct tool, then transfer and replication is also secure. It can be very quick. You don't have to set up lots of things to get your application running. Therefore, the downtime of your support test environments is very minimal. Well, what do I need to do? Well, have a word with your DBA. Now, you may be the DBA at your organisation as well, but solutions for achieving this are things like dbvisit or Golden Gate as examples. But also, if you run your Apex application in an Oracle Cloud service, then there is a cloud option within your dashboard for just setting up a clone of the schema. Some things to consider and think about if you are going to do this, though. It's quite common that Apex applications will link to or communicate with other systems, other applications, other schemas, other databases. And as part of your cloning process, you must update all these links to support it, to point at the equivalent test environments, or just to remove the link altogether. Also, think about what data you may need to change after a clone. Do you need to reset users' passwords so you can log into your test environment as a particular user? Do you need to remove or mask any sensitive data that's in there so that it's not available to be viewed in non-production? All of this can be done as part of a script that you just run at the end of your clone routine. Okay, next for application support is issue logging. And let's face it, it is software, so there will be bugs. But how do we log and allow users to report issues in an Apex application? Are we as support going to get all the information we need from a user when an issue is reported in order to diagnose it? And how do we then track and manage these issues afterwards? Okay, so I'm going to switch to my Apex application now. Here's our application. It's a very simplified example, but it's a form for retrieving employee names based on putting in the ID. And if I put in 101 and submit the page, I get a name back. If I put in an ID that isn't associated with anyone, I get no name found. But I've not been a very good developer, and there are some bugs in my application. If I try 102 as my employee ID, for example, and click submit, we're getting what's called an external error, an error in the database, or PLSQL. And the procedure doesn't work. If we try 103, we're getting a different type of error here, a internal error to the Apex engine. Now, this is the default behavior for an Apex application if you don't add anything further. And other than the code that has got an error in, there's nothing wrong with this. An error is displayed. The application doesn't crash in any way. But when it comes to reporting the issues as a user, we've got a bit of a problem. How do they do this? They could potentially copy this and put it into an email to support. They may take a screenshot, or when they're raising a ticket. But are we, as application support, going to have enough information to diagnose the problem? Remember, this form here is an incredibly simplified version of what an Apex page looked like. You may have hundreds of items and lots of different processes that run on the page, and it's quite likely that when you've got a large, more functional application, that the user probably isn't going to be able to easily give us enough information in order to investigate what went wrong. We're possibly not going to get the item ID that we require, etc. So, is there anything we can do to help with this? Well, Apex has got a built-in system for users to give feedback or report issues, and it's tied into the team development area of the application, and it's very quick and easy to enable this. If I go to my application builder, I'm going to have to create a new session. There we go. If I go to my application properties for this application, click this switch in properties to set allow feedback to yes. Create a new page of type feedback, select the type of page and click create. So that whole process of setting this up took about 10 seconds or so to add, and now if I go back to my application and reload the page, there's a new button available up here in the top right hand corner, and it allows users from the front end to click it, and session context is in there. We know what page it's on, we know what application it is. I have had a problem here, and obviously they may put in here what they were trying to do, what IDs they were entering, etc, etc, if they wish, but then they click submit feedback, and where does that go? Well, us as a support team can be using this team development area of Apex. Now, the team development area of Apex can be used right from the beginning of a new application. It allows you to, it's a sort of a cut down version of an agile tracking system. It allows you to create milestones and features within an application and lists that the development team can use in order to track as features are completed and things are built, etc. But the bit we're looking at today is where these feedback entries go, and if you click feedback within team development and click here, we can see the issue that the user has reported is just here, and if I click on this, we've got the information that they've provided us. We have the application that it occurred in, we know which page it occurred in, but if you scroll a bit further down, we've got lots of other useful information. We know what schema the user was in at the time, we have their session ID, we know when the issue occurred, we have information to do with what browser the user's using, what address they're accessing it from. But this is probably the most useful one that we have available to us when we're trying to diagnose an issue, is we have the full dump of the user's session state, all the item values that were current at the time the user reported the issue. And that's pretty good. So the people triaging these feedback entries as they come in can acknowledge these and log them as a bug, and then they can assign it to developers or supporters within the application here and create it. And then if we go back to the team development area and this time look at bugs, we've now got a new bug which has all that information in, and then when the issue has been investigated and fixed, we can close this bug entry down. And that's pretty good, and although the feedback system that's built into Apex is great, there's a couple of problems still with our application. These error messages that the user is seeing up here, they're not great, they're not particularly user friendly. They could potentially be a security issue in that you may be revealing names of items or database information within your application that could potentially be a little bit of a security risk. And also the other issue is the user still has to complete this form. If they don't complete this form, then we're not going to know that an error has actually occurred. But quite simply though, we can create our own custom error handling within our applications, and generally that is what we do at Explorer as standard practice. Now, within my database, I have created a package called package error, and in here I've defined a function called custom error handling, which takes in an Apex error type record as its only parameter. And from here, once we're within the code, we can detect what type of error has occurred. Is it an internal error? Is it common runtime errors? And this code can expand as you wish and as you deem necessary. Now, what we do is we generate a reference ID for this issue by calling my other function, which is in this package. And what this function does is it collects all the session state to do with the user's session at the time an error is occurring, and it automatically creates a feedback entry in the Apex development dashboard. We get that feedback number and put it into our ID. We insert all this session information into a table, a custom table here, and we also craft an email and send that to the support desk. And this function, by the way, the custom error handling, it's in the documentation for Apex. I've got a few customizations within it, but I would strongly recommend that any application that you build, you include this as standard. As you can see here, I'm then customizing the error message that the user receives in order to put the reference ID from my feedback entry into the message. So once you've created this this function within your package, within your database, if you go back to the application properties and click on error handling here, you can, all you need to do is put in the function name. You don't need the parameters in, and click apply changes. So now if I reload my application in order to pick up that change, and this time click submit, this time we've got a much more friendly error message. We know that a constraint violation has occurred. We're informing the user that application support are investigating, and we're telling them that if they wish to follow up, we're passing on the reference ID that application support will be using. So the user has all the information they need. They haven't had to submit out a form, and I would strongly recommend calling that error package within all your exception blocks within your code in order to log any issues into a table. If I now go and look at that table that I mentioned, error queue table, you will see that we have logged, I think that one's today's, yep, that one is today's. So we've got the user that was logged into the application, we have their page name, we have all the session information here, and we have the error that they got there. And if I open my mail client, we can see that we have all the information has been sent in an email to support. And finally, if I go to the team development area and feedback and have a look, here you can see we've automatically created a feedback entry within the team development area of Apex. We have the error message that occurred, we know all the user's information, and we have all the session information that was available there, that we know what happened when the error occurred. Okay. So to summarize on reporting issues from an Apex application, you can very quickly add on the built-in feedback system that Apex has got, where issues can be logged in the front end and then tracked within the team development area. I would strongly recommend creating a custom error handling function in a package so that users get a much cleaner error message, an incident number, and the knowledge that the issue has been reported to application support. You should also create a function, probably within the same package, for logging errors and session information into a database table, which, as I mentioned, you can then call from any piece of code within PLSQL exception blocks, and all the things like automatic emails and feedback, etc., is optional. I've just demonstrated some of the ideas of what you might want to do. Also, as we know, Apex is great at integrating with other technologies and calling web services. So things like Jira and Team Services, they all have APIs available, which you could add into your error package, so it will automatically create issues in whatever system it is for you use for tracking issues. Okay, so probably the main job of application to support is to investigate issues with a look to fixing them. And this usually involves the following things: replicating the error in a test environment, investigating what is causing the problem in order to find a root cause, checking the documentation, and then figuring out if there is a workaround for the user to do, or with that isn't necessarily a fix straight away. So now we're going to have a look at how we as application support can investigate issues when one has occurred. If I go back to my application, provided the application is running in developer mode access, which it will be on your development or support environment, you have an option available within Apex for debugging. And all you need to do is press debug within the application developer toolbar, generate the error, and then click this view debug next to it. And what Apex gives you is a full trace of everything that has occurred when rendering a page and drawing the page, and also when you click actions or submit pages and page processes run. So a large amount of this you'll never necessarily need to look at, but we can see that we have the procedure here that has caused an error. We have the stack trace of the particular error, and the other thing that Apex has, if we look at the source within this page, if we look at our submit process, what I've added in here is an API call to the Apex package apex_debug, and that allows us to output any information we want into that debug library. So if I go back to my page and view the debug, you can see that from that code I'm outputting the ID before the code runs, and you can see that's put into the log. And believe me, when you are investigating an issue within an Apex application, you use this debugger a lot. You get lots of information in here. You can see which processes took the longest time in order to run. You've got an exact timing of execution, so very useful when you are investigating performance issues and display issues and things like that. And this Apex debugger will become your friend when you are investigating issues. And all of this is built into Apex for free. So, what have we seen that can help us when we're investigating issues in Apex? Well, Apex has a built-in debugging tool which logs everything that is happening on the page. If you need more, there is an API, Apex Debug, and you can output statements from the code into the log. If you need even more advanced logging options, such as very specific timing within your PLSQL processes in your database, you should check out a PLSQL library called Logger. Don't forget though, Apex is running within your browser, so you also have all the browser tools there for free for diagnosing issues to do with how items are displayed, or if there's any JavaScript options. In Chrome, you just need to press F12 to bring up your development mode in order to see information on how the page has rendered and any JavaScript errors that have occurred. Okay, so releases. As support, what problems do we have when it comes to managing releases? Well, we need a way of informing users about upcoming downtime. When the application is unavailable for an upgrade, we want to show the users a nice informative message that possibly says when the application is going to be available again. We want to be able to deploy as quickly as possible. We don't want the application down for days when we're doing an upgrade. And when the installation is done, we may want to allow just our test users access initially in order to log in to complete smoke tests without allowing everybody to log in. And we also want an easy way of rolling back the update in case there are problems during deployment. Okay, so for releases, there's a few things I'm going to demonstrate. If you go to the application properties of your application, the first one is we want to display a message to the users that our application is going to be going down at a specific time. This application will be unavailable from 4 p.m. and this is all done from the global notification in your application properties, and you can also put in HTML into these if you wish and click apply changes. If I now log out of this application, you can see that we have a message available here, and log back in. You can see this message is displayed by default on every page, providing it is within your template for each page. So we can display to the users that the application is going to be unavailable. We don't necessarily need to send them emails, they'll be able to see it straight away within the front end. So when our application is down, we also want to display to them a useful message saying why the application is down, rather than just them getting a 404, etc. If we go back to our application properties, we have a message for unavailable application. So we could say this application is currently unavailable at this time. It will be available again at 16:20. And then what we do is change the status of the application to unavailable while we carry out our upgrades. We click apply, and now if I refresh the application, so when the user clicks on a link to visit our application, they're given a much more friendly error message saying that the application is currently available and also given a time in which it will be available again. Now, usually with your Apex application, the largest part of your code is probably going to be within the database. So once we've made the application unavailable, as part of our release, we can be updating our tables, packages, etc., etc. But then when it comes to actually upgrading the application itself, you can either use the SQL script that comprises the application, or if you are on an environment that has the development mode available, you can just use the wizard to import the new application. But be careful that within the application you are importing, you have the same properties set as we do here, because they will get overridden. So I'm not going to demonstrate reinstalling the application, but it is a very quick process through that wizard in order to install the application. I would also not be too afraid of doing live deployments if it's a small bug fix, for example. Just replacing the application while people are still logged into it is also something that is possible with Apex. Once we've deployed the application, we may want to only allow our test users into the application. So if I change this status to restricted access and populate some users into here, I'm just going to allow my admin user to log in. If I go back to the login page and now log in as admin, you can see I was able to successfully get to the application, but user A still gets the message that the application is unavailable. Again, all built in to Apex for free. If after the smoke test anything has gone wrong with the installation, you want to be able to quickly roll back, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. As part of any updates to your database, it would have been wise if you have rollback scripts to roll back packages, any updates you've done to tables, etc., etc. And for the Apex application, it is just a case of using exactly the same wizard or rerunning the SQL file of the original application into the database in order to roll back. But this won't be the last time I mention this. Remember, everything to do with your application is held within the Oracle database, and you can exploit that in application support. You can use database functions such as flashback in order to reset the application and data to a specific point in time. Okay, so when I first gave this presentation, one of the things someone mentioned was that quite often you're going to be in a run-only environment, so that nobody has access to the development dashboard. So a lot of these properties to do with setting the global notification and the application status and who has restricted access, etc., aren't going to be available, because if an application is locked, such as this one is, then we're not able to update any of the properties. Now, one of the things that we always install in any workspace now is this application here. And what the application does is it queries the metadata in order to return the status of the application, the unavailable text. So then, without necessarily having access to the developer dashboard, we are able to update the status and global notification of applications. So from here, I'm going to remove the global notification for our application. I'm going to set it back to available with developer toolbar and apply those changes. Quickly show you how the how this page is updating those properties. If I set this application back to run and build, and then go back to my builder and refresh, all we're doing here in the page process is calling the APIs under Apex util, which update the application status and the build status. And then if you this allows you to make applications available and unavailable and put global notification messages on them by an administrator, rather than necessarily someone having to do it all through the development dashboard. So, in summary on releases, there is a global notification and downtime message. All of these are actually stored within the database and there are APIs available. So as I demonstrated, there's nothing stopping you having an application within the workspace for managing what is or isn't available or updating these global lists of navigation notifications. Deploying an Apex application is really straightforward through the builder or SQL Plus, and can also be done live as well. And then rolling back is just the reverse, or as I mentioned, use the power of your database. Take a snapshot backup and roll back if required. So, monitoring and reporting. An operations manager once said to me that he wasn't bothered at all what goes wrong with the system, but what it shouldn't be to application support is a surprise, i.e. if a customer reports a problem or rings up, then we should probably already know about it, or at the very least know what or where to look straight away. Which is where monitoring and reporting comes in. Now, Apex has a built-in activity monitoring tool, which I'll demonstrate to you shortly during a demo, and providing your application has logging enabled in the application definition settings, then every page view and activity is logged within the database. And this enables an administrator to monitor user activity in every application. All of that information is actually stored, unsurprisingly, just in different tables within the database. So, as we know, Apex is a great reporting tool, and it's very easy to build reports on this information. We can use the power of the interactive reports, subscriptions and filtering in order to create custom reports on the activity. So this is in the front end of the application, available to administrators, so that again it doesn't need to be accessed through the development dashboard. But although the interactive report and its options are pretty great, we can also do even better. After building our queries on these Apex views, what managers often want is nice looking reports to be emailed to them automatically. Well, our reporting add-on tool of choice is PLPDF. I'm not going to give a demo today on setting up and configuring PLPDF. Check out their website for all of that information. But what I will show you is what one I have created for this application during the demo. So, in our development dashboard, if you click the user administration option up here and click monitor activity, all of this stuff is built in for free. We can see which users have been logged in, how many pages they have visited. We can see which pages have been viewed most of all over each application. We can see any errors that have occurred, so these are the ones that I demonstrated to you earlier, have been logged within the activity monitor information. We can see information on usage over a certain number of days, page events that have occurred. And the last one to show you is we can also, all the login information is logged as well. We can see if users are getting their password wrong regularly and what time they were logged in, etc. So as I mentioned, if I go back to my application, I'm currently logged in as user A and I don't have any information available here, but if using an authorization, I have added an administration menu here, and these reports that are available within the activity monitor within Apex can very easily be lifted out into the front end. So here we're looking at page views, and we can add some extra filters onto it, or use the power of the interactive report to create subscriptions or download this data. Now the other thing I mentioned is that we have the ability to then create nicer looking reports. So if I click export on this report here and download the report using PLPDF, this has created a nicer looking report. We can put logos on it, we can display and view the information however we want, and it's incredibly customizable and is just a PLSQL package within the database, so you can create scheduled jobs to call and run this report and email it out to managers on a regular basis. All of this activity monitoring built in to the Apex application. So, to summarise monitoring and reporting, one thing Apex does very well is reporting, so it should come as no big shock that it has a built-in reporting tool for monitoring performance that provides some pretty great information. You can very easily add some front-end reports onto this data so that it can be viewed in the front end rather than giving people necessarily developer dashboard access to the activity monitor. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning is that the logs are rotated every week for these tables within Apex. So if you are going to use this this method of doing it, you probably want to automatically set up something that backs up these views into your own table and then report from them instead. Apex, with or without add-ons such as PLPDF, is a great reporting tool. So, performance. How quickly is your application running? Are there any pages that are taking a long time to load? Well, a lot of support tickets often relate to performance. Well, how does Apex do on performance generally? Well, our general advice is that when developing an application, the key really is to write efficient SQL. Make sure your database is indexed well, use sensible joins, use bulk collect, all the things that you would do for any data tier in your application, and then just let the Apex engine handle the rest really. And don't forget about tools such as SQL Tuning Advisor and Explain Plan for optimizing SQL of applications. Performance problems can be investigated. We've already seen how the performance of pages can be viewed in the activity monitor logs and then lifted out into the front end. And also when we're using the debugger, this breaks down each individual link of performance to find poorly executing individual statements as well. Also, as I keep mentioning, the application is in your database and you must exploit this. There are tools available for your database to help you. OEM and SolarWinds have great built-in monitoring and performance analyzing capabilities, and you can use them to query for long-running SQL of production level applications. Okay, so this is the last category I mentioned. This is a list of things that I put together that can be particularly useful to keep in mind during development of Apex applications to help support down the road when they are looking after the application in the future. Documentation. Comment your code. There's no limit to how many comments you can put in there, particularly if you're doing something a little bit unusual. Put some comments within your code. Apex has built-in developer comments for each page available as well. You can explain the purpose of a page, why it's doing something a particular way. You can help stop errors coming in the first place by using the help text option of Apex in order to give the users information on what they need to be entering into form items. It would be no harm attaching a schema diagram into the application files for the future in order to aid with understanding the database schema behind your application. Don't do any hard coding within your application. Pretty much every new application we create, the first thing we do is create some logical type tables, and then a package for updating, setting and retrieving those, and then an admin part of an application which should be used for updating or setting any of those. It can be a real big challenge to application support hard-coded values. Make use of a couple of other features built into Apex, which is page groups and also the ability to share your session across multiple applications on the same instance. In order to separate out functionality, this can really help in finding areas of the application in which we need to look, and also if we're doing a deployment, only having to make a particular module unavailable in order to install the new version. Keep your naming consistent, so I'm talking about things like items, regions, and packages as well. Don't leave them as their default of new on the end for regions. Even if you're not displaying the title of a region, give it a meaningful name. Give your validations, processes, dynamic actions and branches sensible names of what they do and how they're activated. It allows someone who didn't initially write the application to quickly get an overview of the purpose or what thing might be running when a page is submitted. Keep major logic out of triggers in your database. If you can avoid triggers at all, please do, but it can be very hard in application support working out what's going on in an application and then realizing that there's a huge amount of logic within the triggers in your database. And we also see quite a lot of problems with performance related to triggers as well. Always package up your functions and procedures. Don't leave them as standalone. Into useful groups. Use as many Apex packages, Apex APIs as you possibly can. You don't need to write a procedure for logging out debug. There's one built in, etc. When you come into the end of development, at the very minimum, run the advisor in order to fix the most common issues that Apex is able to detect. Do it natively if you can when developing an application. I use Apex functions. Keep plugins to a minimum. There are some very useful plugins out there. I use a lot of them myself. But if you can achieve it easily using what is natively built into Apex, it makes future upgrades much easier, and also working out what's happening with items and what they are returning on a page a lot easier. Use the dynamic actions as much as possible rather than writing your own JavaScript as well. So, to summarize what we've been talking about today, we set out at the very beginning to establish if application support was harder with an Apex application. Well, no, it isn't. And in fact, some of the biggest challenges that face application support can be met with a little bit of thought being applied during development to those who will be supporting it in the future. And there's some great stuff built into Apex to help you out as well. Also, finally, don't forget, with Apex applications, the code is in your database, and I can't stress enough to exploit that. With the Oracle database, we have the security, backups, restores, which we can use to help us with the application support of our application. There's a little link there to a little bit of further reading on lifecycle management with an Oracle application, which was an Oracle white paper from a few years ago. Strongly recommend having a read through that. So, thank you very much for attending and listening. I hope this presentation has given you a few things to think about, but mainly the confidence that it is quite easy to support an Apex application. I hope you've all had a really good conference. I certainly have. If you want any more information, then please take a look at the blogs on our website at the link on the screen, or come and see me afterwards for a chat. Please check out our website, and here is my email address if you have any further questions. Thank you very much.